Sometimes your body moves before your brain understands why, and sometimes that instinct is the only reason someone survives. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not real silence. The kind hidden underneath expensive music and fake laughter. Violins floated through the ballroom of the Beaumont Grand Hotel while crystal chandeliers burned gold above hundreds of Manhattan's richest people, but beneath all of it, something felt wrong. Heavy. Sharp. Like the air before a thunderstorm. I adjusted the silver tray against my hip and forced myself to keep walking. Smile. Serve champagne. Don't stare at billionaires. That was the job. At 24, I'd learned wealthy people preferred invisible staff. Especially at events like this. My black uniform itched against my skin, and the 4-inch heels the agency made us were slowly destroying my feet, but rent in Manhattan didn't care about comfort. Neither did student loans. Table 7 needs another bottle, my manager whispered as he rushed past me. And smile more, Claire. I almost laughed at that. Smiling felt impossible when my nerves had been twisted tight all night for reasons I couldn't explain. Maybe it was the weather outside. Rain hammered the tall glass windows overlooking Fifth Avenue hard enough to blur the city lights into streaks of silver and gold. Or maybe it was the men standing near the east balcony. 4 of them. Japanese. Dark tailored suits. Perfect posture. Too calm compared to everyone else in the room. I noticed them because they weren't drinking. At a gala filled with politicians, CEOs, and socialites trying to drown themselves in champagne, sobriety stood out. One of the men tilted his head slightly while speaking. My chest tightened instantly. I knew that movement. Knew it because my mother had spent most of my childhood teaching me how to survive in silence. She'd lost her hearing when I was 6. Lip reading became our second language. Even now, years after her death, I still caught myself reading strangers' mouths automatically in crowded places. It was instinct. Dangerous instinct sometimes. I should have looked away. I didn't. The tallest man spoke first. His lips moved slowly. Enough for me to understand every word from 30 feet away. The poison goes into the 3rd plate. My hand froze around the tray. Another man answered calmly. After the toast. My pulse slammed hard against my ribs. No. No, I misunderstood. I had to. People didn't casually discuss poison at charity galas in Midtown Manhattan. They just didn't. I swallowed hard and forced myself to keep moving through the crowd, but my eyes drifted toward the head table automatically. Toward the man seated beneath the enormous gold centerpiece while half the room subtly watched him without appearing to. Damien Moretti. Even I knew who he was. Everybody did. Some called him a businessman. Others called him something much darker. The only thing everyone agreed on was simple. Powerful men feared him. He sat with one arm resting against his chair, black suit perfectly tailored, dark hair swept back from a face too sharp to look approachable. He wasn't smiling while the mayor spoke beside him. He barely looked interested. But the entire room revolved around him anyway. Like gravity. One of the servers approached his table carrying silver-covered dinner plates. My stomach dropped. 3rd plate. Oh my God. My breathing turned shallow instantly. Think, Claire. Think. Security surrounded him. Men with earpieces lined the walls. There was no way someone like Damien Moretti could actually be vulnerable tonight. But then why were those 4 men watching so carefully? Why did one of them check his watch the second the plates arrived? The server placed the first dish down. Then the second. Then the third directly in front of Damien. My body moved before my fear could stop it. The tray slipped from my fingers onto another server's stand beside me as I shoved through the crowd. Someone cursed when I bumped their shoulder. I barely heard them. All I saw was Damien lifting his fork while the ballroom lights glittered across polished silver. "Don't let him eat that." I heard my own voice too late. Heads turned. Gasps spread across the ballroom. Damien looked up sharply just as I reached the table and slapped the plate hard enough to send it crashing onto the marble floor in an explosion of shattered porcelain and sauce. The music stopped. Every conversation died instantly. And somewhere behind me, I heard the unmistakable sound of guns being unholstered. For one impossible second, nobody moved. The shattered porcelain spun across the marble floor in tiny white fragments while dark sauce spread beneath Damien Moretti's chair like spilled ink. My chest rose so fast it hurt. I could hear every heartbeat inside my skull. Then the room exploded into motion. "Do not move." The voice came from my left. Cold. Controlled. A man in a black suit had a gun pointed directly at me beneath the table line where most guests could not see it. Around us, wealthy donors pretended not to panic. That was the strange thing about rich people. Even terror looked polished on them. Damien stayed seated. That scared me more than the gun. He did not flinch. Did not curse. Did not even look surprised. He simply stared at me with pale gray eyes sharp enough to cut through bone. "Explain," he said quietly. The ballroom felt 10 degrees colder. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Suddenly I became aware of how insane I looked. A 5'2" catering waitress standing in the middle of Manhattan's most exclusive gala after assaulting a billionaire's dinner plate. My hand started shaking. My voice cracked immediately. I heard them talking. Damien's expression did not change. "Who?" I swallowed hard and glanced toward the east balcony. The 4 Japanese men were gone. My stomach dropped instantly. "They were standing over there," I whispered. "They said the 3rd plate was poisoned." A few nearby guests gasped softly. Someone muttered, "Jesus Christ." The man holding the gun looked toward Damien for instructions, but Damien never took his eyes off me. He studied me the way people study storms approaching over water. Calculating danger. Calculating truth. "You are telling me," he said slowly, "that you risked your life based on overhearing strangers at a party?" I read lips. The words slipped out before I could stop them. That finally changed something in his face. Not surprise exactly. Interest. Behind him, another man stepped forward carrying a small silver fork. Older. Dark suit. Calm eyes. Security maybe. He crouched beside the shattered food carefully while the entire ballroom watched in suffocating silence. Nobody touched their drinks anymore. Nobody smiled. I realized then how powerful Damien truly was. One moment earlier the room had been filled with laughter and violin music. Now 300 people stood frozen because one man had gone quiet. The older guard picked up a piece of the salmon from the broken plate and exchanged a glance with Damien. "Kitchen," he murmured softly. Damien gave one small nod. Half the security team disappeared instantly toward the service corridors. My knees suddenly felt weak. Oh God! This was real. I had not misunderstood. A hand gently grabbed my elbow. I jerked hard enough to almost lose balance before realizing it was one of the female event coordinators. Her smile looked terrified. "Claire," she whispered urgently. "What did you do?" I barely heard her. Damien stood slowly from his chair, and the entire ballroom unconsciously shifted backward to give him space. 6'3". Black suit perfectly fitted. Calm in the terrifying kind of way hurricanes looked calm on television before they destroyed entire towns. He stepped around the shattered plate without looking down. Then he stopped directly in front of me. Up close, he smelled faintly like cedarwood and expensive cologne. But underneath that was something colder. Control. "Look at me," he said quietly. I forced my eyes upward. Huge mistake. His gaze locked onto mine instantly and held there. Intelligent. Exhausted. Dangerous. If you are lying, he said softly enough only I could hear, there is nowhere on earth you will disappear where I cannot find you. My throat tightened painfully. I am not lying. For 3 long seconds, he just watched me breathe. Then chaos erupted near the ballroom entrance. One of the security men rushed back inside with panic breaking through his professional mask for the first time. Sir, he said sharply. You need to see this. Damien never looked away from me. What? The kitchen dog collapsed after tasting residue from the plate. The room went dead silent again. And suddenly every person inside. The Beaumont Grand Hotel looked at me differently. People stopped pretending to eat after that. Crystal glasses remained frozen halfway to mouths. Politicians stared at Damien like they were waiting to see whether Manhattan would still exist tomorrow morning. I stood in the center of it all trying not to faint. The female coordinator beside me slowly removed her hand from my arm like touching me had suddenly become dangerous. Damien turned his head toward the security guard. Clear the ballroom. His voice never rose. It did not need to. Within seconds, the music shut off completely. Staff moved quickly through the crowd while wealthy guests gathered purses and coats with forced calmness. Nobody argued. Nobody questioned him. That terrified me more than shouting would have. Real power never needed volume. I watched senators, CEOs, and television personalities leave that room with lowered eyes while Damien Moretti stood motionless beside shattered porcelain. Rain streaked the giant windows behind him, silver flashes cutting through Manhattan's skyline. He looked less like a man and more like something carved from the storm itself. Claire Bennett. My stomach dropped when he said my full name. I never told him my last name. Come with me. Not a request. 2 words. Calm. Absolute. I opened my mouth instinctively. I really think I should go home. One of the guards almost laughed under his breath. Damien did not. You are the reason I am still breathing tonight. His pale eyes locked onto mine again. And the men who poisoned my food know that. Cold spread through my chest instantly. I had not thought that far ahead. God. The 4 men on the balcony. They had seen me stop him. Seen my face. My pulse started racing all over again. Damien noticed immediately. He noticed everything. Exactly, he said quietly. Now come with me. I should have refused. Every survival instinct I had screamed that following a mafia boss into a private room at midnight was the kind of decision women regretted in documentaries. But staying alone in Manhattan after interfering with a poisoning attempt sounded worse. Much worse. One of the guards escorted us through a side corridor away from the ballroom while staff avoided eye contact completely. The farther we walked from the Gala lights, the quieter the hotel became. Thick carpets muted footsteps. Gold wall sconces cast soft amber shadows against dark wood panels. Expensive. Silent. Suffocating. Damien walked beside me without touching me once. Somehow that felt more intimidating than if he had grabbed my arm. How long have you read lips? He asked finally. Since I was 6. My voice sounded small in the empty hallway. My mother was deaf. And tonight was the first time your talent saved someone important. I glanced sideways at him carefully. I did not know it was going to be you. One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not a smile exactly. Something sadder. Most people in this city would not have intervened. Most people did not hear what I heard. No, he said softly. Most people value self-preservation more than courage. The words hit me strangely hard because courage had nothing to do with it. Panic did. Fear. Instinct. I still felt like throwing up from adrenaline. We stopped outside a private elevator guarded by two more men in black suits. One of them pressed a button immediately when Damien approached. Nobody even looked surprised to see him. The elevator doors slid open in total silence. I stepped inside first because one of the guards gestured for me to move. Polished steel walls reflected my pale face back at me. My mascara was smudged beneath my eyes. My hands still trembled. Damien entered beside me a second later. The doors closed softly. For the first time since the ballroom incident, we were completely alone. The elevator began rising. Penthouse level probably. My throat tightened. Am I in trouble? The question escaped before I could stop it. Damien stared ahead at the changing floor numbers for several long seconds before answering. Claire. His voice dropped lower somehow. More personal. If you were in trouble, he finally looked at me. You would know. A shiver ran down my spine so fast it almost hurt. Then the elevator stopped. The doors opened slowly onto a private penthouse wrapped in glass and city lights. And suddenly I understood something. Terrifying. The ballroom downstairs was not where Damien Moretti truly ruled. This was. The penthouse looked nothing like I expected. No gold statues. No ridiculous movie villain decorations. Just silence. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire space, revealing Manhattan glowing beneath sheets of rain nearly 80 stories below us. The city looked small from up here. Tiny. Fragile. I stepped carefully onto dark hardwood floors while warm jazz drifted softly from hidden speakers somewhere inside the apartment. Everything smelled faintly like cedar and coffee. Expensive without trying to be. Dangerous in the same quiet way Damien was dangerous. One of the guards remained near the elevator while another disappeared down a hallway after a silent nod from Damien. Then suddenly it was just the two of us again. I hated how aware I was of that fact. Sit, Damien said calmly, loosening the cufflinks on his sleeves. I glanced toward the enormous cream-colored sofa near the windows. Am I being detained? He looked at me over his shoulder while removing his suit jacket. Do you intend to run? Maybe. Something flickered briefly in his expression. Almost amusement. Then yes. I should have been offended. Instead my pulse betrayed me by speeding up slightly. He draped the jacket neatly across a chair before walking toward a glass bar near the kitchen. Every movement he made looked controlled. Efficient. Like he wasted nothing. Tea or whiskey? He asked. What? You are shaking. I looked down and realized he was right. My fingers trembled hard enough that I curled them into fists instinctively. Tea, I admitted quietly. Wise choice. Rain tapped softly against the giant windows while he prepared hot water with the kind of calmness that made tonight feel even more unreal. Somewhere beneath us, the city was probably exploding with rumors already. Poisoning attempt at the Beaumont Gala. Damien Moretti nearly killed. And meanwhile I was standing barefoot because my heel had broken during the chaos. Watching the most feared man in Manhattan make tea like this was a normal Tuesday night. You keep staring at exits, Damien said without turning around. Heat rushed into my face instantly. I am not. You counted security positions in the elevator. He finally looked back at me while pouring hot water into a black ceramic mug. And you checked the penthouse cameras the second you walked inside. My stomach dropped. I did not mean to. I know. He handed me the tea himself. Our fingers brushed for less than a second. Warm. Steady. Mine felt frozen compared to his. Most people stop noticing details when they panic, he said quietly. You notice more. I wrapped both hands around the mug carefully, mostly to hide the trembling. That skill almost got me killed tonight. Damien leaned one shoulder against the marble kitchen counter. That skill kept you alive long enough to get here. The way he said here unsettled me more than it should have. As if this penthouse existed outside the rest of the world somehow. Safe and dangerous at the same time. I walked slowly toward the windows before I could stop myself. Manhattan glittered beneath the storm like scattered diamonds. Yellow taxis crawled through rain-soaked streets far below while lightning flickered somewhere over the Hudson River. I should call my roommate, I whispered. Emily is probably worried. Your roommate already received a message from your phone saying you are staying with coworkers after the gala. I turned so fast tea nearly spilled over my hands. You sent a message from my phone. Would you rather she contact the police? That is not the point. No, Damien said softly. The point is that whoever organized tonight failed. Silence stretched between us. Heavy. Then his expression changed slightly. Not colder exactly. More distant. People become reckless after failure. A chill moved slowly down my spine. You really think they will come after me? Damien held my gaze for several long seconds before answering. Claire. His voice dropped low enough that it almost blended with the rain outside. You publicly prevented the murder of a man whose enemies have spent years trying to reach him. He stepped closer slowly. Not threatening. Somehow worse because of how controlled it felt. What do you think happens to witnesses in situations like that? My throat tightened painfully. I looked away first. Huge mistake. Because the second I did, I noticed movement reflected in the glass windows behind him. One of the guards near the elevator had lifted his hand toward an earpiece suddenly. His entire posture sharpened instantly. Damien noticed too. The warmth vanished from his eyes in less than a heartbeat. What is it? He asked sharply. The guard's face hardened. Sir, he said carefully. Someone just tried to access the service entrance downstairs using a cloned staff credential. Every hair on my arms stood up at once. Damien looked back at me slowly. You see, he said quietly. Now you understand why you are not leaving. The entire penthouse changed after that sentence. You could feel it in the air. The guard stopped looking relaxed near the elevator. One moved toward the hallway while speaking quietly into his earpiece. Another checked the security monitors built into the marble wall beside the kitchen. I stood frozen near the windows clutching my untouched tea while rain crawled down the glass behind me in silver rivers. Suddenly the penthouse did not feel luxurious anymore. It felt fortified. What does clone credential mean? I asked quietly. Damien's jaw tightened slightly. It means someone copied an employee access card. So somebody is inside the building? Possibly. My stomach dropped hard enough to make me dizzy. I looked instinctively toward the elevator doors. Damien noticed immediately. Nobody is getting up here, he said calmly. You sound very sure. His eyes shifted toward the armed men near the entrance. Because I pay them to make sure of it. That answer should not have comforted me. Somehow it did. One of the guards approached Damien a moment later holding a tablet. Security footage from the loading dock, he said quietly. Damien took the device without a word. I tried not to stare while he watched the screen, but curiosity won. Did they catch whoever it was? He remained silent for several seconds before turning the tablet slightly toward me. Grainy black and white footage filled the screen. Rain blurred the camera lens while a hooded figure stood beside a locked service. Entrance downstairs. The image quality was terrible. But not terrible enough. I recognized the posture instantly. One of the men from the balcony. My blood went cold. That is him, I whispered. Damien looked at me carefully. You are certain? The shoulders. I pointed weakly at the screen. And the way he stands. I remember. Damien handed the tablet back to the guard immediately. Double the lobby detail. The guard nodded once and disappeared again. Silence settled heavily across the penthouse afterward. I stared down at the city lights below while trying to slow my breathing. This was insane. 12 hours ago my biggest concern had been paying next month's electric bill. Now armed men were hunting me because I slapped a dinner plate out of a mafia boss's hand. You are thinking about running again? I looked over my shoulder sharply. Damien stood near the kitchen island with one hand resting against the marble counter. Calm. Watching me the way storms watched coastlines before landfall. Can you blame me? No, the honesty in his answer surprised me enough that I blinked. He walked toward the windows slowly, stopping beside me without crowding my space. Manhattan glowed beneath us in blurred gold and white reflections. Fear keeps people alive, he said quietly. Panic gets them killed. I let out a shaky breath. You say things like that way too casually. One corner of his mouth moved slightly again. That almost smile. Occupational hazard. I should not have laughed. Especially not there. But somehow a small nervous sound escaped me anyway. Damien looked down at me immediately like he had not expected it. What? He asked. Nothing. I shook my head quickly. You just do not sound like a normal person. I was not aware normal people survived poisoning attempts at charity galas. Another laugh almost escaped me before I caught it. The strange thing was how quickly the fear shifted around him. It never disappeared completely. But it changed shape somehow. Became sharper. More focused. Less lonely. Thunder rolled somewhere over the city while silence settled between us again. Then Damien spoke without looking at me. You should sleep here tonight. Every muscle in my body tensed instantly. Sleep where exactly? There are 6 guest rooms. He finally glanced down at me. Contrary to popular rumor, Claire, I do not force terrified women to share my bedroom. Heat rushed straight into my face. That is not what I meant. It was exactly what you meant. I opened my mouth to deny it before realizing he was right. Damien looked back out over the skyline. You are safe here. The words should have sounded controlling. Instead they sounded tired. Honest. Like a promise he had repeated too many times in his life. Before I could answer, the elevator chimed softly behind us. Every guard in the penthouse straightened instantly. Damien turned sharply toward the doors. The warmth vanished from his face in less than a heartbeat. A second later the elevator opened slowly. And an older man in a dark gray suit stepped out holding a thin silver file in one hand. His eyes landed on me immediately. Then on Damien. We have a problem, he said quietly. The woman from tonight was not the only target at the gala. The temperature in the penthouse seemed to drop instantly after those words. Damien's expression hardened in a way I had not seen before. Not anger exactly. Recognition. Like a man hearing an old nightmare knocking at his door again. Explain, he said calmly. The older man stepped fully into the penthouse while one of the guards closed the elevator behind him. He looked to be in his late 50s with silver hair and tired eyes sharp enough to belong to someone much younger. 3 members of the city council left the gala 20 minutes early, he said. Their security detail never checked in afterward. Damien's jaw tightened slightly. Missing? Vehicles abandoned near the Lincoln Tunnel. The room went silent except for the rain tapping against glass 80 stories above Manhattan. I stood frozen near the windows trying to process everything at once. Poisoning. Fake credentials. Missing politicians. None of this sounded real anymore. It sounded like one of those crime documentaries people watched while folding laundry. Except I was standing inside it. The older man finally looked toward me directly. So this is the waitress. Claire Bennett, Damien corrected quietly. Something about the way he said my name unsettled me. Not ownership exactly. Recognition. Like I had become important somehow. The older man nodded once. Vincent Russo. I shook his hand automatically before realizing his grip felt more like a warning than a greeting. You saved his life tonight, Vincent said. That makes you very valuable. Everybody keeps saying that like it is supposed to comfort me. A tired breath almost resembling amusement escaped him. No, Miss Bennet. It is supposed to frighten you. Damien stepped toward the kitchen island and loosened the watch at his wrist slowly. Every movement looked controlled despite the tension thickening the room. What else? Vincent opened the silver file in his hands. The men from the balcony arrived under diplomatic credentials connected to a Tokyo investment group. Fake? Damien asked. Very. Vincent slid several photographs across the marble counter. Even from where I stood, I could see blurry surveillance images. The same 4 men from the Gala. Interpol flagged 2 of them 6 months ago, Vincent continued quietly. Corporate sabotage. Political blackmail. Suspected assassinations. My stomach twisted painfully. Assassinations. Damien remained perfectly still while studying the photographs. Why tonight? Vincent hesitated slightly before answering. Because somebody wanted the city unstable before tomorrow's port negotiations. Damien's eyes darkened instantly. The shipping contract. Vincent nodded once. If you died tonight, there would have been chaos across every union connected to your docks by morning. I looked between them slowly. Wait. You own the ports. Both men looked at me at the same time. I immediately regretted speaking. Damien finally answered first. Partially. Vincent coughed lightly into one fist. That is a generous understatement. I stared at Damien differently after that. Not just wealthy. Not just feared. Infrastructure wealthy. The kind of power built quietly beneath cities while ordinary people never noticed. Suddenly the ballroom made more sense. Why politicians obeyed him. Why security moved like military. Personnel around him. Damien noticed the shift in my expression immediately. You are overthinking again. I am standing inside a penthouse with men discussing international assassins and shipping empires, I whispered. I think I earned the right to overthink. Another almost smile touched the corner of his mouth briefly before disappearing. Vincent watched the interaction carefully without commenting on it. Then his expression hardened again. There is another issue. Damien looked up immediately. Vincent turned toward me. The catering agency uploaded staff photos online after the gala for promotional purposes. Cold spread through my chest instantly. What does that mean? It means your face is now connected publicly to tonight. My pulse started pounding again. Take them down, Damien said sharply. Already tried. The images were copied before removal. I closed my eyes briefly. Oh God. Damien walked toward me slowly while Vincent continued speaking somewhere behind him about security protocols and media containment, but the words blurred together beneath the roaring sound of panic in my ears. Damien stopped directly in front of me. Claire. I forced my eyes open. His voice lowered slightly. Breathe. I do not know how you are this calm. Practice. People are hunting me because I can read lips. No, his gaze locked onto mine completely. People are hunting you because you chose courage over fear in a room where everyone else stayed silent. My throat tightened painfully. Nobody had ever said something like that to me before. Then one of the guards near the elevator suddenly stiffened. His hand moved toward his earpiece instantly. Sir, he said sharply. We just lost camera feed on the south stairwell. Every guard in the penthouse moved at once. Damien's eyes never left mine. Stay behind me, he said quietly. And for the first time all night. I obeyed immediately. The next 30 seconds felt unreal. Guards moved across the penthouse with silent precision while rain battered the windows hard enough to sound like static against the glass. One man locked the private elevator manually. Another checked weapons near the hallway leading deeper into the apartment. Nobody panicked. That frightened me more than panic would have. It meant this was familiar to them. Damien remained directly in front of me, broad shoulders blocking part of the skyline behind him. "Talk to me," he said quietly into the silence. "What?" "You notice details other people miss." His pale gray eyes held mine steadily. "If someone entered this building tonight, I want to know what you noticed earlier." My brain struggled to catch up with the question. Adrenaline still rushed through me too fast. "I do not know." "Yes, you do." His voice stayed calm. "Certain." Like he trusted my instincts more than I trusted them myself. I closed my eyes briefly and forced myself to think back. The gala. The balcony. The elevator downstairs. Tiny details surfaced slowly through the panic. One of the men had a burn scar near his left thumb, I whispered. Damien stayed silent. Listening carefully. And, I swallowed hard. One of them kept touching his ear every few seconds. Vincent looked up immediately from the security monitor. "Communication habit," he muttered quietly. Damien nodded once for him to continue. "Professional operatives repeat physical checks unconsciously under stress." My stomach twisted hearing them discuss human behavior like forensic scientists. "There is more," Damien said softly. I looked at him again. The tallest man never drank anything at the gala. "Meaning?" Vincent asked. "Meaning he expected to leave quickly." Silence followed that observation. Heavy silence. Damien watched me differently after that. Not like a frightened waitress anymore. More carefully. More personally. Before anyone could speak again, the penthouse lights flickered once. Every guard instantly reached toward concealed weapons. My breath caught painfully. The light steadied again a second later, but the atmosphere changed completely. Vincent cursed under his breath. Backup generators should have prevented that. Damien's expression darkened instantly. "They are testing response time." The guard near the security panel suddenly spoke again. "Sir, south stairwell feed restored." "Show it." The camera footage appeared on the wall monitor beside the kitchen. Grainy black and white images flickered across the screen showing empty concrete stairs descending through the luxury tower. Nothing moved. Nobody appeared. "Rewind 30 seconds, Damien ordered. The footage rolled backward. Then stopped. My heart nearly stopped with it. A figure stood motionless near the lower stairwell door for less than 1 second before disappearing from frame again. Hood up. Dark clothing. Still. Watching the camera directly. "That is him," I whispered immediately. Damien glanced toward me sharply. "You are certain again?" "Yes." My voice came out weaker this time. He stood the same way at the gala. Vincent zoomed the image closer. The face remained hidden beneath shadows, but something else became visible. White gloves. Damien's jaw tightened slightly. "Interesting." "What?" I asked quietly. He looked back at the screen. "Professionals avoid fingerprints. But white gloves are theatrical." Vincent nodded slowly. "Message sending." A cold shiver crawled across my skin. Whoever these men were, they wanted Damien afraid. The strange thing was, he did not look afraid at all. He looked focused. Dangerous. "Claire," Damien said suddenly. I turned toward him instantly. "Go to the guest room at the end of the hall." "What? Now?" "No," the word surprised even me. Damien's eyebrows lifted slightly. "No. My pulse raced harder, but I forced myself to keep talking. You said they are testing responses. If someone is trying to get inside, splitting up sounds stupid. One of the guards glanced at me like he could not believe I had spoken to Damien Moretti that way and survived. But Damien just stared at me quietly. Then something unexpected happened. A low sound escaped him. Soft. Brief. Realization hit me a second later. He was laughing. Not loudly. Barely even visibly. But definitely laughing. You really do not scare easily, he murmured. I am terrified, I admitted immediately. I just think clearly when I am terrified. His expression shifted again after that. Softer somehow. More human. Then his phone buzzed sharply against the marble counter behind him. Every person in the penthouse froze instantly. Damien walked toward it slowly. And checked the screen. The warmth disappeared from his face in less than a heartbeat. Vincent noticed immediately. What is it? Damien looked up from the phone. The catering manager from tonight. Silence swallowed the room. She was just found unconscious in the hotel garage. My blood turned cold instantly. Damien's eyes locked onto mine. And according to security footage, his voice lowered dangerously. Someone asked her where to find Claire Bennett. The room felt smaller after that. Not physically. Emotionally. Like the walls themselves had started closing inward around my name. Claire Bennett. A waitress from Queens whose entire life had never stretched farther than overdue bills, subway delays, and double shifts. And now strangers were searching parking garages for me in the middle of the night. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself without realizing it. Damien noticed immediately. He noticed everything. When did this happen? Vincent asked sharply. Damien checked the message again. 8 minutes ago. Alive? Yes. Relief hit me so fast my knees almost weakened. I barely even knew the catering manager, but the thought of innocent people getting dragged into this because of me made my stomach twist painfully. Vincent ran one tired hand across his jaw. The leak happened too fast. Somebody already had eyes on the event staff. Damien's gaze shifted toward the dark windows overlooking Manhattan. Or inside the hotel. Silence followed that thought. Heavy silence. The kind that made even the guards exchange brief looks with each other. One of them moved toward the security monitors again while another disappeared into the hallway checking doors manually. Rain continued hammering the glass outside like impatient fingers. I suddenly missed ordinary sounds. Traffic. Coffee shops. My roommate singing badly in the shower. Normal life felt a million miles away now. Claire. Damien's voice pulled me back instantly. Come here. I hesitated for half a second before walking toward the kitchen island where he stood beside Vincent. A folder rested open across the marble counter now filled with photographs and printed reports I probably should not have been seeing. Damien slid one image toward me carefully. Do you recognize him? My breath caught immediately. The man in the surveillance photo stared back at me from grainy black and white print. Hood lowered this time. Sharp features. Thin mouth. Emotionless eyes. That is the tallest one, I whispered. The one who never drank. Vincent exchanged a quick look with Damien. Name is Kenji Watanabe, Vincent said quietly. Former corporate intelligence contractor. Which means? I asked. Damien answered without looking away from the photograph. It means he specializes in gathering information before companies collapse. And now he poisons people. Now, Vincent muttered darkly, he works for whoever pays enough. My pulse started racing again. Why would people like that care about me? Damien finally looked up at me fully. Because professionals eliminate uncertainty. I swallowed hard. Meaning? Meaning you are the only civilian witness connected directly to tonight. The words landed heavily in my chest. Civilian witness. The phrase sounded clinical. Cold. Like I had accidentally stepped into somebody else's war. Damien closed the file slowly. Which is why nobody outside this room learns where you are staying. What about Emily? I asked quietly. My roommate is alone. She already has security. I blinked rapidly. You assigned bodyguards to my apartment? Discreet ones. That is insane. No, Damien said calmly. Insane would be pretending this situation is temporary. The blunt honesty in his voice left me speechless. Vincent's phone buzzed suddenly against the marble counter. He checked the screen once before cursing softly under his breath. Damien's expression sharpened instantly. What now? Vincent looked directly at him. Media leak. My stomach dropped. What kind of leak? Vincent turned the phone screen toward us. An online article filled the display beside blurry Gala photos already spreading across social media. Waitress saves billionaire during poison scare at charity event. And there I was. Frozen mid-motion beside shattered porcelain with my face completely visible beneath ballroom lights. My chest tightened painfully. Oh God. Damien took the phone silently. His jaw hardened the longer he read. Comments are already identifying her, Vincent said quietly. The internet moves fast. My hands started shaking all over again. Thousands of strangers looking at my face. Talking about me. Sharing my name. I suddenly could not breathe properly. Damien noticed immediately. Claire. I looked up too fast. Everybody knows now. My voice cracked hard enough to embarrass me. Everybody knows my face. The panic must have shown clearly because Damien stepped closer without hesitation. Not touching. Just close enough that his voice cut through the noise in my head. Look at me. I forced myself to focus on his eyes. Calm gray. Steady. You are safe here, he said quietly. You keep saying that. Because it is true. How can you promise that? Something changed in his expression then. Something older. Sadder. Because, he said softly, I failed to protect someone once before. Silence swallowed the penthouse instantly. Vincent looked away first. One of the guards lowered his eyes. I stared at Damien carefully, realizing for the first time that the exhaustion behind his calmness had nothing to do with tonight. Before I could ask what he meant, the security monitor near the hallway suddenly flashed red. Every alarm in the penthouse activated at once. The alarms ripped through the penthouse like a scream. Red lights flashed across the security panels near the hallway while every guard reached for communication devices at once. My entire body locked in place from pure adrenaline. Report, Damien said sharply. One of the guards pressed a hand against his earpiece. Motion detected near the private service elevator. Vincent's expression darkened instantly. That elevator should be inaccessible from outside the building. Apparently not tonight. Damien moved immediately toward the security monitor wall, every trace of warmth gone from his face now. Calm. Cold. Focused. The version of him the entire city feared. I stood frozen beside the kitchen island trying not to panic while black and white security footage flickered rapidly across multiple screens. Empty hallways. Empty stairwells. Rain streaking against exterior cameras. Then one screen shifted. A figure in dark clothing stepped briefly into frame near the lower service corridor before disappearing again. My breath caught painfully. White gloves. That is him, I whispered instantly. Damien looked toward the monitor. Lock all internal access points, he ordered. Now. The guards moved without hesitation. Heavy magnetic locks clicked somewhere deeper inside the penthouse. I suddenly realized this apartment was designed like a fortress. Not luxury first. Survival first. Vincent stepped beside Damien while scanning another security feed. They should not have reached this level. They did not, Damien answered coldly. They wanted us distracted. My stomach tightened. Distracted from what? Nobody answered immediately. Then Damien's phone rang sharply against the marble counter. Unknown number. Every person in the room noticed it at the same time. Silence swallowed the penthouse again. Damien stared at the screen for 2 long seconds before answering. Speak. A distorted male voice filled the quiet room softly through speakerphone. Calm. Controlled. Good evening, Mr. Moretti. Every hair on my arms stood up instantly. Damien's expression never changed. You failed tonight. The man laughed quietly. No. Tonight was only an introduction. My chest tightened painfully. The voice continued smoothly. The girl interests us. Damien's eyes shifted toward me instantly. That was your mistake. Something dangerous entered his voice then. Not loud. Much worse. Personal. The caller ignored it completely. You should not become emotionally attached to witnesses. My pulse stumbled hard inside my chest. Damien's jaw tightened slightly. You seem confused about your position here. Do I? The distorted voice sounded almost amused. Your city is already unstable. Your allies are disappearing. Your politicians are frightened. And now the entire internet knows the face of the girl who embarrassed you publicly. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself instinctively. Damien noticed immediately even while keeping his attention on the call. If you touch her, he said quietly, there will not be a country on earth capable of hiding you from me. Silence followed those words. Real silence. Even the guards stopped moving for a second. The man on the phone laughed again softly. There it is. Damien's eyes darkened. What? The reason this became interesting. The line disconnected instantly afterward. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Rain hammered the windows. Red alarm lights continued flashing softly against the walls. And I stood there staring at Damien because I realized something terrifying. The man on the phone had been right about one thing. Something had changed. Damien slowly lowered the phone onto the counter without looking away from me. Claire. My throat tightened immediately. What? He stepped toward me carefully through the flashing red light. Listen to me very carefully. Every instinct inside me sharpened at the tone in his voice. Tonight was supposed to end with me dead. I swallowed hard. Instead, you interfered. Another step closer. Now they will keep coming. The honesty in his voice frightened me more than threats would have. I am sorry, I whispered before I could stop myself. Damien's expression shifted instantly. Do not apologize for saving my life. Everything became worse after I stepped in. No, his voice softened slightly for the first time since the alarm started. Everything became clearer. My pulse raced harder under his gaze. Somewhere behind him, Vincent quietly ordered the guards to rotate security positions, but the sounds blurred together beneath the weight of Damien's eyes on mine. You asked earlier how I could promise you safety, he said quietly. I nodded once. He stopped directly in front of me. Close enough now that I could smell cedarwood and rain lingering against his shirt sleeves. Because I have already lost one innocent person to this world, he said softly. And I will burn every enemy I have before I lose another. My breath caught completely. The city lights flickered beyond the storm behind him while the alarms finally fell silent one by one. Then Damien reached past me toward the untouched cup of tea sitting cold on the counter and gently slid it closer to my hands again. Such a small gesture. So painfully normal after everything. "Drink," he said quietly. "You are safe here tonight." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed him.